outstanding historical novel about women and the secrets and burdens that they carry, and called her an author to watch, which I know we all have. We've loved The Chocolate Factory, The Jam Maker,
Outstanding
and now The
historical
Hobart,
novel about women.
Hobart
That means
Hotel.
we're live.
That means we're live.
Yeah.
So Mary Lou has worked and played all over Australia. I like the idea that she's played. I think it means played in a band, but we hope that she has played all over Australia as well. She now slow travels the world with her husband and writing in places like Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia along the way. We can't wait to talk to her about that. And of course, the Hobart Hotel was set in Uruguay, where she spent time writing the book. So if you do have questions for Mary Lou, do put them in the chat tonight. But I just want to say I really love this book, Mary Lou. I loved the fact that it's got history, mystery, and glamour. It was right up my alley. I loved that the past is really a spy love story and that the present is a coming of age story. And I thought you blended them beautifully together. It's a very, very rich work. But I thought I might give you a chance to, for I think most of our members tonight have read it, but just for anyone who hasn't, do you just want to give us a quick rundown on what the book is about?
Well, it's a dual timeline and it starts in 1939 in Hobart, the grand opening of Australia's most talked about and most glamorous hotel, which is the Rest Point Riviera. A beautiful building. It still stands. They were thinking of knocking it down. I'm so glad they didn't. It's still there. And that's where we meet Sabine, who has recently returned from the continent and she's looking for a safe place to hide out during World War II. She's experienced the horrors of the Spanish Civil War and she doesn't want anything to do with another war. So that's why she's in Hobart. And she gets blackmailed into going to South America, Uruguay in particular, which is it's just a viper's nest of spies and intrigue because it's a very strategic location, both for the Allies and the Axis. Everyone wants Uruguay. So that starts in 1939, goes through into the early 40s. But the other timeline is set in 1973, which is the year that Australia's first legal casino, and I always lean on the legal, there are lots of illegal casinos in Australia before this, but this was Australia's first legal casino, which happened to open in Hobart at Rest Point. And we meet Jenny, who is a young Hobart girl. She's got a job as a receptionist. Her life is very small, very narrow, as a lot of our lives were in Hobart back in the day. And she gets offered a job as a ladybird, which is the name given to the first croupiers at the Rest Point Casino, and her life just opens up. And yes, you're right, Belinda, it is very glamorous.
I
The
love
clothes,
it.
the times, the money, everything. Yeah, and I really enjoyed writing it. It was my first dual timeline, and the first half I actually wrote in Uruguay. So all of Sabine's story was written in Uruguay, and all of Jenny's story was written back in Australia.
That's
Mm.
perfect.
I feel like I'm coming home to sort of talk to you about this again because we did the event in at Dimmicks in Sydney, your only event. So I love that I get to return to this because it's one of my favourite reads of the year. So
Yeah.
as you just said, you move across two timelines and we meet two very different women, and we're going to sort of dive into that more. The novel opens in 1939. We meet Sabine. She's arrived from Europe for the grand opening of the Rest Point Riviera Hotel. Then we jump to 1973, and Jenny is, as you say, she's hired as a croupier or ladybird, which I love the history of that, and we'll talk more about that as well. But let's start with the hotel itself. I feel like I know the answers to these, but no one else does. So talk about the hotel itself, the inspiration, where the inspiration came from. You're known for your sort of Hobart-based books. And yet this one takes us to Uruguay, which is very, very different. And I don't think I've ever read a book like set there. So it was, to me, it was fascinating. But I know that you've mentioned that it was there that the seed of the inspiration came.
Yeah.
But also, tell us about the casino and how that sparked the story as well.
I always thought someone should write a novel about Australia's first legal casino in Hobart, of all places. So unlikely, but there it was. And I was 12 years old when it opened. So I remember a little bit about it. And my oldest sister became a ladybird a little bit
Mm,
later. She wasn't one of the originals. Um, so it was very prevalent in my life growing up. I was only 12, so I didn't get the just the amount of controversy and the angst and how many people were against it, because I wasn't that savvy at the age of 12, I must admit. But my dad was part of the legal team, the government legal team that helped make it happen. And my mum was staunchly against it, as a lot of Hobart people were. There
mm,
was a referendum, the whole shebang. It went on for years. And I thought, well, this is fascinating. The first legal casino, it's something I remember. It was something that was part of my family, but it wasn't enough. Just on its
mm.
own, it wasn't enough. And my publisher was saying, we want another book from you. And I was like, not yet. Look, writing historical fiction, and I know, Belinda, you know what this is like. You really, the first legal casino, something I remember. Oh, sorry, I've got a loop going on.
But
So
it
I'm not quite
wasn't
sure.
enough.
Just on its own, it
Someone's
wasn't
got
enough.
two
And my
devices
publisher was saying,
happening.
we want another book from you. And
Is
I was
that
like,
truth?
not yet. Look, writing historical fiction, and I know,
Mm,
Belinda, you
mm.
know what this is like.
There we go. You might just have to
Okay.
hit the mute button on everyone,
There we
Jane.
go. Yep.
All right.
There we
Okay.
go.
So
Cool.
as I was saying, Belinda, you know what this is like. There's so much work and research that is involved in writing historical.
Mm,
We just got to unmute
There we
Mary
go.
Lou. That's it. Perfect.
mm.
So for the amount of work that's involved in writing a book, you really, really have to have it in your heart and your soul, because you know how much work it's going to be. So just the opening of the West Point Casino on its own wasn't enough. But then I found out about the opening of the West Point Riviera in 1939. And once again, this amazing hotel, the most glamorous hotel in Australia at the time, in Hobart, of all places. Um, and when I was in Uruguay, I found out that the first naval battle of World War II happened in the very same week. And I went, okay, all right, I've got a book now. And that's where it all came together, that I'd have Sabine at the opening of the West Point Riviera in 1939, and I'd have Jenny at the opening of the West Point Hotel Casino in 1973.
It
And
worked really, really well. Mary Lou, just to ask, why was it Tasmania was attracting a casino and a luxury hotel? Because, I mean, the luxury hotel, I guess I can understand, but what was it particularly about Hobart and not, say, Brisbane or Sydney to have the first legal
Mm.
casino? Was it a governmental difference, or was there some loophole that allowed Tasmania to do it, whereas the other states couldn't?
Because it was off the mainland, I think.
um, there are quite a few factors at work. One was that Tasmania really needed people to go down there. They needed visitors. They were also in yet another recession. Tasmania is so small, so it's always going into recession,
Yeah.
always. In every book I write, there's a recession
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Tasmania. It's the economy is so fragile. So Tasmania was very keen to have a draw card and a source of funds.
Mm,
So a big chunk of the money that went through the casino actually went into government revenue.
yeah.
But there's also the other fact that it's Tasmania. It's less likely to attract the undesirable elements that were already in Sydney and Melbourne. It's removed. It didn't have that history of the bigger cities,
Yeah.
so it was easier to contain. Money laundering was it's interesting. I'm on the Isle of Man, and money laundering is everywhere. Well, people battling it is
Yeah.
everywhere because it's a banking haven here. Um, and so I hear money laundering a lot and people talking about it. And it was such a big thing for the casino to make sure it didn't happen. And the incident in the book where Jenny and her friends are waiting to get in and the police and security throw a couple of guys out, that's based
Mm.
on fact. They were just so aware of any undesirable influence, gangster influence, criminal influence coming in, they were just on the ball, which would have been a lot harder in a much bigger city.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, we love the two characters. So we have
Mm.
Jenny in 1973 and we have Sabine um, at the beginning of the Second World War. Now, we love Jenny because Jenny feels like a really fresh 21-year-old, all of us, could be anyone. And you wrote her so well, that sense of excitement, the sense of embarking on a big adventure and the friendships that she makes and so on. And what I thought
Mm.
was really interesting about her in particular and her coming of age is she seems to decenter guys in the end, which I thought was really interesting
Mm.
because you didn't give her a fixed romantic story. She really has strong friendships and she doesn't ride off into the sunset with a man. So I thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, Sabine is this wonderful femme fatale, and we love femme fatales, and she does it so well. She's a classic glamorous spy. So we just wondered, was there an inspiration? Was Jenny perhaps your younger self? And was Sabine, I believe, maybe was inspired by Greta Garbo or another movie star character?
Certainly in looks, Greta Garbo's eyes, very much Sabine. I just really wanted her to have her own agency, to be a woman of the world, to not be dependent on any man. In my previous book, The Jam Maker, it's set earlier in time, and Harriet is at the mercy in a lot of ways
Yeah.
of a string of men. And I just love that idea of a strong woman in that time. And I was very much influenced actually by the movies of that time that
Mm.
have very strong, independent, female, sassy,
Yeah.
smart talking, clever, independent women. So that was the vibe I was going for with Sabine. And that kind of character will let a man hang around if she feels like it, but she's not going to be a hopeless woman and fall in love and all that kind of stuff. So that's the vibe I was going with Sabine. But, she does have a tragic past as far as her love
Yeah.
life is concerned. She did let her guard slip with bad consequences. So she's really doubling down on that, being independent, not letting anyone in. And Jenny, interesting enough, I have three early readers, beta readers, and when they read an early version, they said, "Oh, you've got to give Jenny a boyfriend. I mean, like she's 21, she's going to have a boyfriend."
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I gave her a boyfriend, and my publisher went, "No, that doesn't work." And I said, "Well, I'm not surprised because I just kind of put it in."
Yeah.
And you two know, and any writers listening, that you're hoping to get away with something. It doesn't really work, and you're hoping to get away with it, and your publisher just goes no, and your editor goes no. And so I pulled out the romance and made it so much more interesting,
Yeah.
so much more
Mm.
interesting. I
Yeah.
thought.
Mm.
And I do love that thing of found family, and Jenny does find her family with the other
Mm.
ladies, with the
Yeah.
people that and it's so much stronger. She's 21, she'll have 5 or 6 different
Yeah.
boyfriends before she finds the right
Mm.
one.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's
actually
that.
do think it's
Yeah.
reflecting 21-year-olds today, that a lot of young girls are so much more interested in traveling and discovering themselves and enjoying themselves with their girlfriends. They're not um, really, I mean, Lisa, her friend, is a bit of the pushy matchmaker. Um,
Mm.
type in that. It is Lisa, isn't it? It's Lisa that's trying to set her up,
Yeah.
yeah, with the characters
Mm,
all the time. Now, Rex was interesting as well because at first you think, oh, it's going against type because he's this kind of goofy guy. And
mm.
you think, yes, but he'll turn out to be the one with the heart of gold, and then he doesn't. So I thought that was really clever. I thought there was some twist there that you weren't expecting. So I actually really enjoy that. I know when it comes to romance, there's this sort of expectation about it, but I love to be surprised by it. So
She
I thought
certainly
it was
walked
really
to the
good.
beat of her own drum, didn't
Yeah,
she?
yeah,
Both
Yeah.
women did
yeah.
in very different times. So I think one of the thing I love about your writing, you're really good at dialogue. And I know you have a theatre background.
Mm,
So, how does that play out in your work process, sitting there? Because I talk to myself,
mm.
a lot. So is that like, are you hearing different voices in your head? And because they're two very, very different women in the descriptions of them, but also tonally, the way that they speak.
Yeah.
And so that's you as a writer making these creative choices, which I love. But you'd be hearing that.
Yes, very much. And it's interesting when my first book, The Last of the Apple Blossom, came out, someone I used to be in a theatre company with said, your dialogue is so
Mm,
good. I think that's
mm,
because you used to be an actor.
yeah.
And it's true, if you're an actor, all you're dealing with is dialogue. You
Mm,
might have a few stage directions, but it's all dialogue.
mm,
And I love dialogue. In one of my books, I realized I had a chapter entirely in dialogue, and I went, oh, I better put something else in here.
yeah.
But for me, dialogue lifts it off the page.
Mm,
Interestingly enough, the first chapter of the Hobart Hotel, there's no dialogue.
mm,
I give her one vocal expression, which is just ha right at the end, because I had to have something.
yeah.
But if I'm getting a bit bogged down in a scene, if I put dialogue, it's usually because I haven't put dialogue in.
Yeah.
And for
Mm,
me, probably because of my background, that's where I live and breathe. I
mm,
absolutely love. And yes,
mm,
I do hear the voices, I hear their tones, their expressions, but also what comes into that is their entire background as
mm,
well.
mm,
How they will
mm,
express themselves, the terms they use, the words they
mm,
choose, all that kind of
mm.
stuff.
And
Mm.
they become so vivid as you're reading it. You really see these two very different women. And I love dialogue driving a story forward. I have a theatre background as well. So I
Mm.
find it really fascinating how people who are good with dialogue use it,
Yeah.
as a writer. And you go, oh, yeah, well, oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And that's so different to the other character. And yeah, so I like, you're very good at it. Tick.
They
Loved it.
definitely had very distinct voices, which I think
Mm.
works. And it also makes it's very important when you are writing dual timeline that all the characters are distinct because dual
Mm.
timeline for some people presents a challenge. But if the characters sort of mishmash and you can't really tell distinctly who's who, then that just adds a layer of difficulty
Mm.
that shouldn't be there. We might go to some comments. Jane, have we got some comments
I'm
from
having a look
chat?
at got lots of people watching on YouTube too, which is lovely. Let's have a look at some of our comments. Where are they? Hi, hi everyone. We've got lots. Here it is. 13 it says. Lauren, loved meeting you with my best friend, also Mary Lou, who's here tonight at the Frankston Library event. Ah, good.
Oh,
Leanne says, I never realised that Rest Point was Australia's first legal casino. Um,
Mm.
oh, and she goes, it was me, sorry. Must have been with the
oh
volume
yeah.
on. Lee said, I can't wait to find out about Rex. I'm guessing he's gay and still in the closet. Um, where's our other ones? Lots of hellos. Uh, Tash, I really enjoyed the full circle. Um,
Mm.
Melissa says, oh, sorry, I'm keep flipping down. I'm really not great at tech tonight, aren't I? Oh, I'm on page 343 of the Hobart Hotel. Mr. Four grandson asked me to use his t-shirt price tag for the Toy Story as my bookmark. Melissa says, just started reading another book as well and just finished this one. Carmen loved the Hobart Hotel and she's now reading the names. And lots of just loved the book. Yeah. So
Oh,
ask some
wonderful.
questions, ladies. Put some questions in there and Mary Lou will answer them as we sort of move forward with our own questions. Where are we
Yeah.
up to?
Well, I think it's my turn because I want to ask a little bit more about Uruguay. Uruguay.
Mm,
So you were there when you were writing the book, Mary Lou,
Mm.
and Jane mentioned that you had some inspiration about there, and you take us into a little bit of the history of the country during the Second World War. I couldn't help feeling that there was a bit of a frustration with the people and how they
Ah,
behaved during the Second World War and their sort of indecision, but a love for the actual country itself. So I thought maybe you'd tell us a little bit about the history and how you researched it and how you became interested in it. But what was it like for you to stay there now? And how different do you think the country is?
researching in Uruguay is a lot harder than researching in Australia because I couldn't go to the library and go through the archives. Everything's in Spanish.
Yeah.
And even though my husband and I were trying very hard to learn Spanish, we spent the first month in a Spanish school desperately trying to learn Spanish. We were hopeless at it. And I think I've forgotten just about everything except Donde es el baño? Where's the toilet? Um, but interestingly enough, it was a very frustrating time for the Allies just trying to get Uruguay to go okay. They were a neutral country and they did remain neutral, which is why I was amazed that the US managed to get military bases in there. And I was lucky enough to have made friends with an 80-year-old Argentinian who was now living in Punta del Este, where we were staying. And he told me a lot about the history. And I said, I can't understand, and I can't find anything about these military bases. How do you know? And he was friends with the former British consulate and got all this information from his friend, including photos and maps and diagrams. And the ex-British consulate said, you cannot publish any of this. I was like, okay, but I can use it as research. And yes, I could. So help comes from the most unlikely of places. And the other thing is I did find a massive PhD thesis about the theatre of World War II, the war in South America. And there was a lot about Uruguay. And that was in English, thank goodness. So I was able to use that. Because my usual thing is, as I rock up to the State Library in Hobart and I just bury myself in the archives and the archivists bring me trolleys full of stuff. But that just wouldn't work in Uruguay.
Mm.
But Sabine is a woman who loves nature in many ways, and it was wonderful to be able to be in the
mm,
physical place, to walk along the beaches that she did, to go into the buildings that she did, to be able to describe the way the waves break and the seabirds with,
mm,
piles of mussel shells and the sea wolves, which is what they call sea lions, at the port. All of that stuff, to bring all of that detail in, it was just wonderful to be there. And some crucial stuff is set at Piriapolis. So to be able to go there, to visit the Hotel Argentino, where she and Artigas stay, all of that stuff was just crucial. And it is beautiful. Montevideo, the architecture is amazing. It is like being in Europe. And Piriapolis is like being on the Mediterranean in France. It's so European, the whole thing. And that's what Sabine is promised by Mr. Gray. You'll feel
mm,
like you can't go to Europe, but you'll feel like you're in Europe.
Yeah.
And that certainly is the case. Now, I was a bit concerned because Mr. Gray and his henchmen are very damning of the Uruguayan people. And I say Uruguayan because that's how they pronounce it. Uruguayan. I did have an Uruguayan sensitivity reader, if you like.
Yeah.
Mm,
And she was fine with it all. But I did put a little thing in the acknowledgement saying, you know, those were Mr. Gray's opinions, not mine.
yeah.
But it was an incredible time. So much subterfuge going on. Everyone thought everyone else was a spy, and on it went.
Yeah.
Mm. Will
That's
you go back there? Because I know you sort of settle in certain places with your slow travel. Do you
Mm.
plan to go back and spend some time there again?
I never say never because we never know. We don't plan too far ahead because things change. It is very expensive to get to
Mm,
South America, and Uruguay itself is incredibly expensive. When I
okay.
came up with the idea for this book, one of the things that made me really happy is I could claim everything on my tax
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Maybe a
we
sequel. Yeah.
we knew Uruguay was going to be more expensive than the rest of South America. We just didn't realize how much more. It's like the most expensive place in Europe.
Mm,
yeah. Now, I
mm.
So,
realize we've been a little bit remiss in asking you something very important about your life and your slow travel, because the very first time I met you, I think we were doing an online book club where Josephine Moon was asking
ah,
me about the divine feline. And I remember that was before your first book was published.
mm,
And this sort of the publishing and the slow travel odyssey that you're doing, I mean, it sounds fabulous. So maybe just tell us a little bit about how you went from, because you were based, where were you? You were in Tasmania then, or were you in Queensland then?
I was on the Sunshine Coast.
We're on the
Yeah.
Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where this sparked to become world, you and your husband to become world travelers.
And your rock and
Um,
roll background.
and your rock and roll background. So let's get a picture
Mary
because
Lou's been around. See, I
yeah,
discovered her from her memoir first.
yeah. We normally
Yeah,
start off by
yeah.
asking our guests to tell us a little bit about how they came to be published and a little bit about their journey. And I realized in a vertigo moment, I didn't really do that.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, so when I left the ABC, that's why I was on the Sunshine Coast. I got a job with ABC Radio. I couldn't believe it, but you know, it was like living in paradise and getting paid to do it. Um, but when I left the ABC, my husband said, "Well, what do you want to do now?" And I said, "All I want to do is travel and write." But we are actually low income earners. We have our super, but that was about it. And so he went away to have a think about how we could afford it. And he came back with the answer, which was bicycles and a tent. And I said, well, how am I going to write?
Mm.
How's that going to work? And then we made friends with people who were pet sitting around the world. But to get decent house sits, you really need to
Mm.
have a lot of referrals. So we started doing it locally. I would treat them as little writing retreats and go off and look after someone else's house and pets, and they'd give me a reference. And then the last house sit that we did together, we were given basically a novel of instructions. There were so many animals to look after. And by the end of 2 weeks, my husband went, no, no, I don't want a house sit because you are living someone else's lifestyle. You're living someone else's
Mm.
choices. And I want to live my own life. So that left us in a bit of a bind. And I think the last of the apple blossom came out during that time. That's right, it came out in COVID, so there was COVID. And then he discovered slow travel. There are a lot of slow travelers on YouTube, and this man loves YouTube. So, and he showed me some of these videos. And usually they talk about the geographical, the tourist things, and the budget. And I kind of wasn't convinced until he showed me one that was an interview with two people who talked about the emotional, spiritual, and how it affected their relationship traveling this way. And I loved that. I loved that interview. And I went, okay, now I understand it. Now I get
Mm.
it. Deeper level, not just a head level. And yes, let's do it. So we got rid of everything. We rented out our place and hit the road. So it's been 4 years now. We have come back to Australia a couple of times, both times unexpectedly, but it's worked out well. And yeah, so this year because I have 3 books to write, not just this year, but
Yeah, I was
there's
about to say that's a
there's
lot,
Yeah.
if
one,
you're traveling.
there's one a year, but I said I need to go back to places we've been before so I can just work. So we've been to Kuching and Borneo twice before. We've seen everything, done everything. And so for 3 months, I basically wrote the first draft of this next book.
Mm.
6 days a week, I was just working. And that's what I said to my husband before we left, before we decided to do this. I said, my life is going to look very much the same as it does here. I'll be in a room on my own, and sometimes I didn't get a room on my own. I just had to work in the shared room that we were living in. Writing, that's what I'll be doing.
Mm.
And I did feel sorry for him in Borneo because I was just working so hard to get this first draft done. And he was just left to his own devices. Now we're on the Isle of Man, which we haven't been before. So I do want to do all the tourist things. It's so like Tasmania. People said to me the Isle of Man is like Tasmania. But we went across the island on the steam train, and I'm looking out the window going, I could be in Tasmania. It's
Yes.
just so
Yeah.
like Tasmania. And then we're going to France, where we've stayed before for 3 months, so I can work on the next couple of drafts. And then we're going back to Morocco, to Essaouira, which is on the coast. We absolutely love it. We have friends there now for 3 months, so I can just work. And to be quite honest, up until this year, it hasn't felt like a burden doing so much work while we've been traveling. But this year, I think because I just worked so hard on Borneo,
Yeah.
and it's like, I just would like a break and look outside, which is what I'm doing. Well, I've been sick the first week we've been here, but what we're doing this week, I'm just going to be a tourist, have a look around, fill up the well again,
Yes.
go, wow, is this Tasmania or is this the Isle of Man? And yeah, and I am looking forward to, we stay in a tiny town called Surrey, which is actually Catalonia country, and it's right next to Spain. And I know we only spent a couple of weeks there before, but I know it well, and I can just burrow in again and do what's necessary. So that's why that's why we're traveling the way we're traveling this year and going back to places we've been before, except the Isle of Man, which is totally new.
I
Yeah.
think if Belinda and I are sitting here going, if we didn't have animals, we're both travelers at heart who are in relationships with four-legged family members that
Complicated
need,
family
yeah.
members.
During
Yeah.
COVID, like everyone else, because our beloved dog had died, and then COVID came along, and like everyone else, I really wanted to get a new pet. I really did. And my husband kept on saying, "Hun, we can't travel. We
No,
can't travel."
no, you can't. So, and if you could just settle in one of the spots that you've been on your slow travel, and that was going to be it, where would it be?
I love the Isle of Man because it reminds me of Tasmania, and because everyone can understand me, and for the most part, I can understand everyone else. There are some fabulous accents here that are a bit tricky, but this has really surprised me. My husband, just about everywhere we go, my husband says, "Oh, I could live here," and I'm like, I'm not so sure. Surrey is great, but my French would have to improve dramatically. And I mean, Uruguay, we were there for 5 months, which is the longest that we've stayed anywhere, and we did make some good friends. But not many people speak English. They don't have to, because everyone's Spanish except for the Portuguese, for the Brazilians.
I know, and there's expat communities everywhere, but I can remember after leaving, I lived in Japan, and then I was in Tokyo, then Vienna, and then I moved to London, and like I could have a conversation with the guy at the newsagents, and it was just, it's like I was talking to everyone, whether they wanted it or not.
I did exactly the same thing when I came back on book tour for the Hobart Hotel. I was talking to people in shops, in the lifts. I was bailing everyone up for the chat.
Yeah.
It's just so
They
wonderful.
understand me.
Yeah.
So going back to the Hobart Hotel, I want to talk about the ladybirds, and I mean this was fascinating to me. It was so fascinating. I had no idea that these gorgeous dolly birds who work in these casinos have to be like so good at maths. It's
Mm,
they're what are they? They're called the croupiers.
yeah,
So they're actually like really mathematical. They've got to be whip smart to be doing this job. And I know that you met a couple of the original ladybirds
yeah.
and became friends with Honey Bacon and Ellie Honey.
Ellie Bolt.
Yeah,
Yeah, Honey
yeah.
Bacon and Ellie Bolt. Yeah.
Hmm. So talk to
Oh,
us about that.
those women. So they're amazing. They're in their 70s. They're still incredibly glamorous. Just and remember everything. And they were my VIP guests at the big launch at
Mm.
West Point in Hobart for the Hobart Hotel. And I actually asked them in front of the audience, can you still do your 17 times table? And they're like, yep. But they were so, so generous. Now, Honey's not on social media, but Ellie is. She's very active, and there's a Facebook group. That's the other great thing that's really useful for research is Facebook groups, the
Yeah.
Tasmanian History group,
Mm.
and then there's a group that's past and present employees of West Point, which I joined because I did work there as a waitress in the grill room
Mm.
for a little bit. And they were great. Everyone on that page, when I would ask a question, they'd all chip in. Um, and and Ellie, I asked Ellie, if she would help me, and then she put me in touch with Honey because they're still really close, really good friends all these years later. And their memories were just so on the ball. They remembered absolutely everything. I did ask my sister, who was there in 1973 as a ladybird, and she said, "Oh, I don't remember anything," which I found
She
quite
good
odd.
at math?
No,
Was she
no, she
right?
stayed doing blackjack because you only have
Uh,
to be able to get to 21.
Was she
mm.
Yeah.
telling the truth when she said she didn't remember anything?
Yeah, I don't remember anything. What are you talking about?
Or was it the
She
lips
didn't,
are sealed?
yeah. She told me afterwards that she didn't want any of her stories making it into the book.
Yeah.
She thought the book was about her, but she wouldn't tell me anything. So later on, she told me stuff. But
That's hard.
yeah.
That's hard. It's not easy to be related to a writer, is it? Or a friend of a writer. You don't know if you're going to end up in a book or not. We might
Yeah.
actually have another look at just the chat, Jane. Just
So,
if anyone's got any comments or questions.
Sue says so fascinating. Leanne said, was there anything you found out in your research that you really wanted to include, but ultimately you had to leave out? That's a good question. Yeah.
That is a great question, and it often happens. Um, but the first thing that pops into my mind is actually something with the last of the apple blossom, where it starts in the 60s but goes into the 70s. And I had a whole thing about the Tasman Bridge disaster when the Lake Illawarra knocked down the bridge and threw Hobart into chaos for many years. Um, and my editor went, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. And I said, but you don't understand how impactful it was. And she's like, don't care. It's not pertinent to the story. And when
Yeah.
you write historical fiction, and maybe you'll relate to this, Belinda, or not, maybe you're better at it than I am, but there is that thing of putting stuff in that you think is crucial,
Yeah.
Mm.
but it doesn't actually serve the story. It doesn't pull it forward. So I end up with one line about the Tasman Bridge disaster. And I was using it as a metaphor for Catherine's fractured relationship with her mother.
Yeah.
But instead of a page and a half, one line did it.
Yeah.
And it was the same with the jam maker, because I've done a whole lot of work on the Hobart Hotel. So before I went on tour with the jam maker, and you probably have this too, Belinda, you're working on another book and then you go on tour with this book, and it's like, oh, I've got to remember what's actually in this book.
Oh
And
yes,
someone, one
that
of
is yeah. I'm
one of
with
my friends
you.
had asked me a question about one of the characters, and I went, who? And I went, oh, I have to read it again. So before I go on book tour, so I actually remember it. And I started reading it, and there would be a line, and I would remember all the research that went into that one line. So I'd read that line, and it would just open up like this flower or a concertina or something, remembering just everything that went into that one line.
Yes.
But with the Hobart Hotel, there was so much good stuff that I got to leave in, which is absolutely true, like the Noel Coward stuff, absolutely true. The Italian spying from the West Point Casino, absolutely true. A lot of people think that I made up Ernest Hemingway's in it, but Errol Flynn being in Uruguay, absolutely true. He was there.
I went
So
down a
there's,
rabbit hole to check on that. That was so interesting to me. I was like, really? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I got to keep in a lot of really fascinating stuff because it was fascinating. It was interesting, and it did serve the story.
Mm.
So
Talking of fascinating stuff, one of the things I do love about writing historical fiction is I like to do some of the things that my characters are doing. So I've learnt like the tango and the Charleston and all sorts of dances that people were doing at the time. And so I was really fascinated about the skill of the ladybirds and the gambling and the chipping and the shuffling cards and so on. So did you actually learn all those skills so that you
no,
know?
and I didn't learn my 17 times table
Oh,
either.
no horse riding? You a horse rider or
No, but
shooting guns from your horse?
I have a friend who's a horse rider, so I checked all of that with her.
Yeah,
And my ladybirds, Honey and Ellie, they read an early version of Jenny's story. I didn't give them the whole book, just Jenny's
yeah.
story to fact check for me, and they pulled me up on a lot of stuff, even though, oh my gosh, they answered so many questions for me. I'm sitting in Uruguay and starting to do the research for Jenny's story. And I was asking them hundreds of questions, and they would write back in such detail. It was fabulous. But no, I'm sorry, I did not do that. But I did go to Uruguay.
There's a really
Good.
wonderful
Good
comment here
impressive.
from Lou. My elderly neighbors are from Uruguay, and I lent them my autographed copy. They so loved the way you described their homeland and were so happy to relive their early years through your eyes. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have had a few Uruguayans read it and just go, oh my God, thank you, because no one sets a book here.
Yeah, no, no. It was so wonderful, so unique. Absolutely. So, and
Hmm.
out of the two, out of Jenny and Sabine, did you have one of those characters were you drawn to more than the other? Or did you just keep flipping depending on who the focus was?
Because I wrote them both separately and then
Mm,
I put them together, and I was just and I'd done a workshop with Jock Sarong. I keep on doing workshops just to learn stuff, and he's such a
mm,
fabulous historical fiction author. And with his book Cherrywood, that's what he had done. He hadn't realized he'd written a dual timeline until his agent or his publisher said, I think this is a dual timeline. So he chopped it up and then put it back together. So I thought, okay, this is possible. I can do this. I'll write
mm,
one story, then the other. And so when I was writing Sabine, she's just so compelling. She's just so out there. She's so
mm,
savvy. She's so smart. Her dialogue with Mr. Gray, I just love it, love it, love
mm,
it. And when it came to writing Jenny, I thought, I don't want her to be overshadowed because I
mm,
absolutely love her. And she's had such a hard time, and she is smart. But Sabine is, oh my God, she's Sabine.
mm,
So how am I going to do this? How am I going to, lift her up to be a match? And so I put Jenny in the first person.
mm,
So Sabine is in the third person. She did that. She thought this. She went there. Although it's all in present tense, so she goes there, whatever. Because that suits Sabine because she does keep
mm.
people at a distance.
Yes.
But Jenny is a lot more open, a lot younger, and I had to give her more energy to meet Sabine's energy. So
Mm.
putting her in the first person, it's just so much more direct.
It was such a
I
great choice. It really was. And I think because so often when you have two protagonists like that and you switch from one to the next, and you're like, as a reader, you often go, oh, I want to go back to
yeah,
my favorite, and it wasn't like that. It's like each chapter that ended with one of your characters, I was like, oh, on to the next one. Oh, yeah, that's right. I love her. So yeah, so I was really engaged with both of them, and they were fabulous. So that was an interesting choice that you made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think structurally you did it really well because the chapters weren't long. so you didn't take us really out deep
Mm.
out of a story and then swing us back into another one. So I thought that was very skillful work there. Well done.
Mm.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Look, I've got to say, I've found the response to the Hobart Hotel. I'm incredibly grateful for the response it had because the Jam Maker did so well, and it's such a different book.
yeah,
The Hobart
Mm.
Hotel is so different. And when the reviews started first coming in, I was holding my breath and crossing my fingers. And it's just so lovely that people have enjoyed it as much
Mm.
as they
Mm.
have.
that's fantastic. Well, I saw
Well,
another question come up in the chat then about
yes,
what you're
and so
working
yeah,
on
actually,
next.
it's a good one. Just wondering what your next book is going to be about, and where will you be traveling to next to write it? So I'm guessing you're in Borneo writing the next book. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, well, one of the returning to Australia stints was last year, and that was to research the next book. And when you said, places that you have visited that you can see yourself living, we based ourselves in Penguin because a lot of it is set on the west coast of Tassie and the
Mm.
northwest. And we both absolutely fell in love with Penguin, which is this tiny town. Doesn't have a bookshop. I said, oh, I could open a bookshop and invite all my author friends to come to Penguin.
Yes.
It's right on Bass Strait.
Yeah.
So my husband and I still talk about, one of these years we'll live in Penguin. Um, but none of the book is set in Penguin. It's just it was a good point to drive from to interview all the Leatherwood honey producers that I wanted to talk to. I'd already done some research. I'd
Mm.
already talked to one of them, but I went back because the idea for the book changed along the way. Um, so it's it has it's about leatherwood honey, which is only produced in Tasmania. Tasmania is the only place in the world that produces leatherwood honey. It's the only place that has leatherwood trees, and they're mostly northwest and west coast. And I had actually started researching back in 2020 a book about the Franklin blockade, which was a defining moment in
Yes.
Tasmanian
Yeah.
Mm.
history. But 6 years ago, I wasn't confident enough because it's such a sacred cow in Tassie.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I just thought I really have to get this right. And the idea absolutely terrifies me because I'll get torn to shreds in Tassie if I do it wrong. But I've come to peace with the fact that I probably will get torn to shreds by some people.
There's always someone, Mary Lou. You can't let people stop
Mm.
you. Yeah.
There are things in there they're not going to agree with. And interestingly enough, when I was on book tour with the Hobart Hotel and I would be asked, what are you writing next? And I would tell them this. And there'd be a very vocal, positive response for people who were against the dam, even blockaders in
Mm.
the audience. And then afterwards, very quietly, when most people would gone, other people would come up to me and go, I do hope you're going to tell the other side of the story. Yeah, yeah. I really do have to get some balance in there. It can't all
Mm.
be, Franklin blockade, rah, rah,
Mm.
rah. It really did split Tasmania very, very badly. Friend against friend, family member against family. So it's a very tricky one. So it's the beautiful leatherwood honey, and I have found out just how vicious and murderous bees are. Been a lot of interesting research about bees, um, and a lot about the Franklin blockade. I've done so much research on this one because I am terrified of getting anything wrong, but I know I'll get something wrong. And I've actually invented something that will probably upset people. So I'm going to have an author's note right at the front saying, this is a work of fiction. I've actually invented this bit. I do hope you forgive me, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a hard thing, isn't it? When you need to be creatively free to tell the story, but then, if it is going to be a controversial subject, then you do tend to, um, worry or think about the critics as you're writing, and that can become quite a hard thing. One thing that
Yeah.
I found as I've got older compared to when I was writing historical fiction when I was a lot younger is I've become a lot more like when I think, oh, this part's going to upset some people, I have a tendency to go, well, I'll do it and I'll see what happens. Whereas when I was younger, I was so concerned about pleasing people that I just actually quite, it's awful, but as I get older, if people get upset, I actually find it more interesting than upsetting. And in fact,
Ah,
sometimes I even find it amusing. So,
well, I shall be getting in touch with you, Belinda, for some, encouragement and support when the time comes for the
yeah.
couple to
Because
hit
look,
North
sometimes if you're
Tasmania.
too pleasing, you're not really saying anything. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's being safe. And it's not like you're going out deliberately
Mm,
to offend people, but you're
no,
telling a story and you're connecting to, you can't tell every aspect of every story. Otherwise, it's sort of like a non-fiction textbook of the story. Sometimes you do have to pick a point of view, and somebody's not going to like it. But people dislike all sorts of odd things in books. And,
mm.
mm.
sometimes if you've written a character that resembles somebody's ex-husband too much, they'll they'll come at you for that. But you can't be sitting there going, "Oh my God, I hope this character doesn't resemble somebody's ex-husband," because, yeah. So I've got to a point where I used to get so upset when people got upset. And now I just think, oh, that's interesting. Someone's upset.
I shall remember that because I am worried about this book. But once again, harking back to Jock Sarong,
Yeah.
I've done a couple of workshops with him, and he said you cannot write for the nitpickers,
Yeah.
and you have what's it plausible deniability. And he says, and
Mm,
also put things in the author's note. So, in my books, I have changed things around, like with the
Yeah.
Hobart Hotel, the naval battle actually came first before the
mm,
opening, but I switched it around. So you put it in the author's note.
Yeah.
But with this
mm,
book, it's just so important because it also includes the flooding of Lake Pedder, which I think was an absolute travesty, and I don't have any trouble coming down on the side of being against flooding that incredible lake.
mm.
Um, but I invent something to do with that campaign, and it has to be out the front because people, I mean, there's a whole campaign in Tasmania to drain Lake Pedder and restore it. People are still so passionate
Yeah.
about that lake.
Mm.
Um, so I do have to put that up front because otherwise people will just go nuts, I think.
Well, we have a
But
lovely comment here from Suze who said, I so loved, and this is many of our book queens, I think, so loved this book, loved both characters, loved the chapters by years, stories. Thank you for a great book. And she says, and yes, what is your next book? So we've just discussed that.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
yeah,
did, I did
definitely a lot of
want,
love for it.
oh, thank you. And I
Mm,
did want to add to that about telling both sides of the story. When I went on book tour, before people had read it, I had a couple of people ask me if I was going to talk, if the book addressed the dangers of gambling. And I
mm,
said, absolutely yes. It's not all fun and glamour.
mm,
There is a very dark side to gambling, and that is very much front and center in Jenny's
mm.
story.
Yes.
It was important to get that in.
Mm,
And with this next book, and maybe it's, because I worked for the ABC for 15 years and you always got to have balance. Well, I think
mm,
that's gone out the window these days, but we used to always have to have balance.
mm.
Um, and I'm very aware of that in this next book that's coming out
Mm,
now.
I
Yeah.
think you do it well, and I think it's a marvelous read, and I'm so glad I got to talk to you twice about it.
Hey,
Yeah.
me too.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mary Lou. You've been such a wonderful guest, and we have really enjoyed doing a bit of a deep dive into the Hobart Hotel. It's very well deserved, its popularity. And thank you to all our lovely book queens who joined us here tonight on
Mm,
both Zoom and on YouTube. We love having you along, coming every month and listening to the fabulous authors that we have.
mm,
So next month we have Anthea Hodgson with her
Oh,
novel The Palace of Lost Virtue.
mm,
So another terrific read, another terrific Australian story. So get reading that. And yeah, and don't forget to leave your personal reviews and let us know what you're reading on our Book Queens Facebook
Mm.
page.
And I'll be putting the recording of this onto the page. So please, if you have any more questions for Mary Lou, just pop them there. And I'm sure at some stage in the next couple of days, she'll pop on and she can answer any questions. But thank you. Thank
Thank you
you
very
for
much. We
coming
wish
on.
you,
And
yeah,
I
all
know
the
you've
best.
had the flu.
Yeah.
But
I know.
yeah.
Look, I have been sick, and I get a bit sooky when I'm sick, and I always get a bit homesick
Mm,
when I'm sooky and when I'm not well. And this has just been so lovely to connect with
mm,
home. So
yeah.
thank you. Perfect
Thank
timing.
you. And can't wait to read your next one, and we'll be in touch in between. But safe travels, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank